Mitch has strong thoughts on that. I agree with him. I was doing a rhetorical bit there. Let's go. Hour number 3 from Indianapolis. It's the NFL Scouting Combine, the Hoffman Show on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube, where you see Mitch Tischler, who decided you almost did a Collinsworth slide.
I was going to Collinsworth slide, but then I decided I wanted to do the air horns with the cat. Meow, 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 meow.
Yeah.
And
there you go.
That's more.
But I know you don't have headphones on right now, but Anthony just hit him again with the meow, 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 meow. And really perfect. Anthony, that was well done out of you, sir.
He's a spectacular producer.
He is. Yeah,
he might be a little shady and mad at him, but he's a great producer.
Oh my gosh!
Oh my gosh, he says. I refuse to sit here and play middleman between the two of you for the next 20 minutes. So I'm gonna go in like somewhat reverse order of what I just did with JP. Of course, you can catch JP and Mitch on the Beltway Football Podcast. How many tables does JP have here? He's got just the 2, and then I brought him over here.
Listen, we have the Audacity table here.
That is a bit. Hold on, can you hand me that sign?
I mean, listen, this is funny in that it's just miserably wrong.
That should say Odyssey DC. It says Audacity.
How about NBC4 is NBC Commanders in DC?
We got signs all over the place that are not making a lot of sense. I will say the one thing that I do appreciate.
All the signs they got right. Monumental Sports is the only one that seems
Monumental,
to be the correct one.
It's some damn Leonsis made a call over there.
Yeah, I'm sure.
I do appreciate that I'm sign number 44 though, because there's inevitably a million Syracuse alums in this room, and 44 is a sacred number in Syracuse lore, and I'm the one who got the table.
44 is a sacred number in Commanders lore.
Yes, it
33
also is. Yes,
as well, which is our monumental table. So we're representing well here.
We are. Retire our numbers. / they already are. That's how that goes down. So I'm going to start in somewhat reverse order of what I did with JP, which I'm going to ask you the question that I'm asking everyone first. And as I said with JP, it hits a little different for you because like we've been on this journey the entire time through this season with this team. But I think because of just how much changed with Washington this year and the way they went about their business, how public they were in terms of the things they were looking for, all the different ways that the organization changed. Like, is there something that you take away from this season that you either learned about team building / the NFL or that was clarified for you in a major way?
Yeah, I would say how quickly you can turn a team around, honestly, is number one. And we all know how important quarterback is, and all the Jaden Daniels talk is obviously well worth it. More so, how a front office can come together and put together a essentially brand new team, 33 new players with the initial 53 last year. I imagine this year it's going to be semi-similar in terms of how many new faces are going to be in Washington.
Yeah, it's going to be a ton.
And how well, if you're able to scout and bring in the right types of players, you can have veteran players who are quote-unquote over the hill, which we heard a lot preseason about with a bunch of different of the Commanders players, but how they can all fit together and give you a product like we saw on the field this year, because for far too long we saw Washington bring in, veteran free agents and they never hit. And all of a sudden you get Adam Peters, Dan Quinn, and you don't miss.
Right. Hilariously, by the way, I ran into Josh Norman outside the building today. So Josh is here doing something.
I didn't say Josh Norman's name.
No, he's an example of a guy that was incredible in Carolina, should have in his prime in terms of what should have been. And I mean, the corner position is volatile as hell. But I do think that one of the things that is interesting, having covered Josh and many others, is like my big takeaway is that, it's more of a clarifying point that I've said a bunch of times before over the years covering this league and covering football in general. But like the way that it came to life this year was wild, which is you are better off having 11 going in the same direction to an inferior plan than the best plan ever or the most talent and people not all working together. And so like that happens on the field in very obvious ways where you have a receiver run the wrong route and messes up this, we had the perfect play dialed up, but whatever happened. Or one guy plays, doesn't get a check in coverage. Yeah. But like to see that on an organizational level where everybody in that building from owner to GM, entire front office, coaching staff.
You skipped over 16 other owners.
16 minority partners. Like everyone was on the same page. And the buy-in creates the best version of everyone, and that overcomes the talent deficit in a way that, like, I didn't even know was possible.
Well, I also think you brought up Josh Norman, and to kind of further that point, it's not necessarily bringing in the most talented individual. it's the most talented individual that fits what you're trying to do.
Right.
And you look at some of the veterans they brought in, aren't guys that are off the charts at RAS or, never, blew the doors off anybody in terms of, being, Bobby Wagner aside, Hall
Sure.
of Fame, whatever. But you bring in a bunch of guys who are all, rowing the ship in the same direction, and you're able to get production on the field. And you can look up north to Philly with Zach Bond, who was a castaway from New Orleans,
yeah.
and how well he fits in Philly and what they did.
They didn't even know that was going to happen, though.
So I was talking to one of the guys, not somebody with the team, but somebody very close to the team, and they were saying that as they were going through the tape, Fangio specifically pointed out Bond and was like, I don't know if what I'm seeing on the special teams tape is necessarily going to transfer, but if it does, this kid could be special, and obviously it turned out well. But bigger point being, it's not going out and getting the biggest name. It's not going out and getting the single most talented player who's the most athletic, strongest, fastest, whatever. It's about finding guys that fit your system and getting everyone to play together.
Yeah, ultimately, you have a job on the field and a job in the building, and everybody embracing their job to the best of their actual abilities will, in a stunning turn of events, unlock the maximum of their abilities.
But like Josh Norman, you brought up, was great in Carolina.
Great in Carolina.
But you bring him in to play a defense that doesn't necessarily fit what he does well is a perfect example of A, why you need a real GM,
yes.
B, why you need a real head coach, C, why you need a real owner, and D, why everything is different right now.
Yes, absolutely true. I also, it was funny as I was setting up this question for some other folks, it was also clarified that owner, head coach, GM, quarterback, Tirico came on the show in the middle of the year, was those are the four things that matter. Yeah. And they literally in the last 18 months have a new of all of them, and they're, one of the best five maybe in the entire, I don't know if DQ is considered a top 5 head coach, but for what he does.
It's hard to argue what he did this season.
CEO style, absolutely, he's one of the best. He's an A version of that archetype of head coach. If you like your Shanahan, McVay, O'Connell type better, then fine, that's your personal opinion. But Dan did enough to build the staff around him and make everything work for him. Okay, the news of the day is obviously the Jon Allen situation. It's not surprising, but it also is one of those things when it hits you, it's oh, well, we're really here. Okay, this is when this is going to go down. What do you make of it and what Adam Peters had to say about it?
I think what Adam said was the right thing to say. You don't want to, obviously, you want to prop the guy up because you're still trying to trade him and get some assets for him. The reality of it is he doesn't have a huge trade market. There's not going to be a ton of return. The talk about him being traded correlating to anything Myles Garrity, I think is a step too far.
I think that's correct. I will say, if there's a Deebo Samuel type of trade, something where another team is in the same position and it helps the math, that could be something where it's a big name trade, but it actually is multiple ancillary pieces that if they work well in their new places could be great. But guys that are going to be cut anyway, and they just trade them for each other.
Exactly, and that's if you're talking about that in a Deebo world, you're talking about John and a mid-round pick for Deebo, or a mid to late round pick for Deebo or something like that. But big picture with Jon Allen, he meant a lot to this organization when the organization had nothing to rely on. And for that, you have to tip your cap to him.
For sure.
He stepped up into a leadership role that isn't in his personality. He's not the type of guy that wants to stand up in front of a room and preach to guys, but he recognized there was a void and he filled it. Now, was he the right person to fill it? There are questions to be answered there.
For sure.
But ultimately, he was a very important part of a very bad organization. Unfortunately, he got paid, didn't perform to the pay. You see what the vision was with Daron Payne, Jon Allen, if you want to talk about all 4 first-round picks. It's what Philly did this year in the Super Bowl and all season long. Ultimately, I think Jon Allen is more of a playmaker at defensive tackle, and I think that this defensive staff wants defensive tackles that are more eating up blocks and allowing room and lanes for linebackers to flow freely and get to it. And so ultimately, I don't know that John, either personality-wise or play on the field-wise, was a perfect fit with this Dan Quinn group. However, he gets a lot of credit for the first, 7 years of his career.
For sure. And did he do enough in those 7 years to get his number retired or go in the Ring of Honor?
No.
No.
I'm sorry.
No.
I didn't mean to jump on that so hard, but
Mitch has strong thoughts on that.
Listen,
I agree with him.
I
I
think fans-
just
he got
was
propped up for a
doing a
long time.
rhetorical bit there.
Fans propped him up for a long time.
sure.
Because he was one of the only things that you could look at.
If you had asked me 2 years into his career, is this guy on that path, I would have said, there's a chance.
There's a chance.
Like, he's really, really good, and he's probably going to be a leader. But
he was the yodeler going up the mountain in the Price is Right game.
Yeah.
He just reached the cliff and fell off the other end.
goodbye. But, should he be cheered if he comes back for alumni
Yes.
events? Yes. That was the second half of my rhetorical question.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to. It was an involuntary response to that. My bad.
Mitchell's opinion is on the record on that one. But that's the thing, right? Is it ran its course. I agree with you that both on the field and off, I don't know that he's a fit with this group, but everyone got along well enough this year, and I think they're handling this the way that NFL business gets done, which is hey, if you can go find something, we're happy to facilitate. It's going to have to work from us. And we're having this conversation with JP, obviously, but sometimes you see wacky stuff then happen in terms of the timing of the release or whatever. The best thing for Washington and the best thing for Jon in this particular case is they try to find a trade for the next week and a half. If it doesn't happen, they let him go. And that's the end of the Jon Allen era.
Yeah. I don't know what's going to happen with it. We'll see. But this might be not the next week and a half. I think this might lead up to the drafts because, deadlines.
You think it could?
I don't think it will, but I could see
because
a
I could see them wanting the cap space. It's $16 million in space.
It is, which is a lot, but that $16 million is how much you're going to spend on your rookie class, and you don't have to worry about spending that money until after the draft. So you can ostensibly hold on to them for an extra month or so if you think that sort of deadline is going to spurn a deal. But ultimately, let's be honest, there's not going to be a massive market for him. Maybe there's a deal for him. Ultimately, you mentioned the Ring of Honor thing. This team was so obsessed with the all decades teams or whatever that the last time they put it out, there were a bunch of players who were real bit players on it. We have to recognize that the 15, 20 years of bad football doesn't mean that we need to overly boost the status of players who played in that era because they were average to good players because there were so few of them.
That's 100% true. And I think the funny thing is now the one guy left from that fearsome foursome, fearsome in the dreams of the people that drafted them.
You get rhetorical there.
Thank you. I need some space to breathe, Mitchell.
I'm sorry.
Need some space to breathe. The one guy left is now Daron Payne, who I think is probably the most misunderstood. And maybe Montez was, in a way, who he was as a player. The edge setting and all those kinds of things were underappreciated in a way. But by the same token, Daron has actually been incredibly consistent over his career. Just 1 year, the pressure rate turned into 11 sacks, and that happened to be the year he was about to get paid, and so they had to pay him. But from a pressure standpoint, who he's been, the types of plays he makes, the hot streaks, Daron's been consistent, and he's now going to be in this position. If we're sitting here a year from now, we're probably having the same conversation about Daron Payne.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, Daron has an opportunity to go out and
he's basically in a contract year again. So
it's a similar situation, but big picture, what I liked about all this was the team recognized, Adam Peters recognized where they were with these guys. 2 years in a row, you're going to have two major deals that you're going to have to figure out. They went out and brought in Johnny Newton, or drafted Johnny Newton. He had his injuries during the offseason. I like that they kept it together. They gave Johnny a year to kind of, get involved. I imagine as we go through this draft, I'm not saying that they're going to be a first-round defensive tackle or even a second-round defensive tackle, but I think there's going to be a top 100 there's going to be a top 100 defensive lineman taken, and I would like to see them go sort of that same route where you kind of ease them in. They did it with Brandon Coleman at left tackle. They did it with Johnny Newton they did it with as much as they could with Mikey Sainers still at corner. I liked it the way that they brought in these rookies and they didn't throw them to the wolves.
Right.
They kind of worked them into a system, let them get comfortable, and also this team is, for the first time in forever, looking ahead. They're seeing, hey, these are the obstacles we're going to have in 2026, 27, 28, 29, and they can use the draft to start working on filling those holes. Not that you're going to get a starter every time, but you're building depth at positions that are going to have turnover coming up. That's a big deal.
Mitch Tischler, Beltway Football Podcast, with us here on the Hoffman Show. the funny thing about there's a million funny things about the combine. This is an absolutely objectively the more I come to it, hilarious event. Because there's the media side of it and like all the information exchanges. Then like theoretically there's the draft part of it. But then like the actual next thing on the NFL calendar and a lot of stuff that happens here is between agents and teams for free agency. So knowing that Washington is going to have currently $80+ million in cap space, let's count another Allen 16. You could have another 10 from Andrew Wiley if you wanted to. They don't have like, oh, we can spend big on whatever type of money, like multiple pieces, because they have so many guys they have to bring back or fill those holes. So it's not like, per empty roster spot, they don't have the most cap space or the second most cap space in the league, but they still are pretty high on the list. So if you look at the free agent class, is there anywhere where you're like, I think they should spend there, either on a particular player that you've got circled for them that's not necessarily bargain bin guy, or a certain position?
I mean, I'm going to steal the Howie Roseman line. I'm sure JP brought it up earlier, but he's uncomfortably obsessed with offensive and defensive lines.
That Mitch Tischler, we talked about. I'm trying to remember. I think JP's autobiography title was A Unique Path. I am uncomfortably obsessed with offensive and defensive linemen.
That's me.
Mitch Tischler. That's your book.
Yeah. You just watch an Eagles offensive and defensive line dominate through the season, but particularly through the playoffs, and their GM is sitting there talking about needing to bolster that.
Yeah.
The same thing has to be in Washington. I like Brandon Coleman. I think, early on, I think they did a good job of working him in, had a solid middle season. End of the year, I think rookie wall / injuries. I want to give him another chance next year. I'm actually going to bring back I'm bringing back Andrew Wiley.
I'm not mad at that.
To be your kind of backup swing tackle, but also your right guard until Sam Cosmi comes back. To me, the big place I want to see them address is right tackle in free agency. I'm not saying that you want to go out and get a $20 million a year guy, but I think that's where you need to try and upgrade on the offensive line. And you mentioned the Montez Sweat not being misunderstood for not being able to set an edge, or for setting edge as well.
Yeah.
I would hope Washington fans watch this season and what happened at the defensive end position and recognize that I'd rather have Montez Sweat get 6 sacks and set an edge and keep, these big run plays from happening, as opposed to Dante Fowler getting 10.5 sacks. I'd like to bring back Dante Fowler if it's a passing down situation role, not as a 3-down guy. To me, free agency I'm spending money offensive and defensive lines, and then working on depth in the draft. And to me, skill position players come from the draft. I'm not in the business of giving up big time dollars to a T. Higgins type, or to another playmaker on the offensive side.
I think that's the funny thing in terms of the receiver position, because they're going to have to sign receivers in free agency because they only have Luke and Terry basically on the roster. I'm sure like the Bryson Tremaines of the world are floating around being like, hey, give me a shot. Yeah, I mean, look, Bryson, I thought played okay for Bryson Tremaine. So that's Bryson's book so far. The rest, as was once said in the song, is still unwritten. But the receiver market is so expensive, and the guy I now feel like I'm picking on Darnell Mooney, but like Darnell Mooney made $13 million. That's the same that Saquon Barkley made last year. So like when people say, "Oh, bring De'Ami back cheap," I'm like, I don't think De'Ami Brown's going to be cheap.
De'Ami's not coming cheap.
And so like, is there a guy that you can get? Like, if you can tell me that I can get Darius Slayton for $8 million, I would definitely consider that. But I think by and large, like going receiver in the draft, going line, making sure that Jaden has like a floor in front of him.
Yeah.
I feel like that's right. And then, like one of the guys that I'm really interested to see if they pursue is Khalil Mack, because you're playing with fire because of his age. They played with fire last year with guys with age, and it worked out in their favor. But and I don't know how much he's going to cost, but it's probably not. It's not going to be $20 million a year, I don't think.
No.
But he's like a guy that earlier in his career, tremendous pass rusher, but still is as good of an edge setter as there is in the league. Like, I mean that legitimately. Like, he's awesome at that. So I do wonder if like he's a guy that they see as a potential fit here, and do you give him $10 million? And is that, one of your, I don't know that's their biggest expense, a $10 million player. I think there's probably someone who gets more than that. But is that one of your splashier signings?
Yeah, I wouldn't hate that. Listen, Frankie Louvu did a really good job when asked to play defensive end. The more that they can get in legitimate defensive ends and let Frankie
I think Frankie's
flow.
better as like Logan and I have talked about this a good
Blitzing.
bit. I think blitzer, yes. Rusher, really didn't have that great of a season.
That's exactly where I am. I think it was out of necessity that they put him there because they just didn't have enough real good end bodies that could get to a quarterback.
And I think they wanted to see if he could do the Micah thing. And, like, he could do some of it, but Micah's Micah.
But there's also something to learn from Dorrance Armstrong, who had 8.5 sacks 2 seasons ago in Dallas as a pass rush specialist. And there was the hope that he was going to be able to take that role and expand it to be a 3-down defensive end and hopefully expand those sack numbers. It's easy to get lost in the sauce and forget that, like, when you come in as a pass rush specialist, you're coming in, hand in the dirt, knowing where the quarterback's going to be, and it's different to get a 3-down guy. And Khalil Mack is a guy who, if he's able to stay healthy, can do that. On the offensive side of the ball, you brought up Debo, and is there a deal potentially there for him, which certainly is. And I like the thought of Debo Samuel taking those wide receiver screens or quick pop passes, as opposed to it being a De'Ami Brown type, because I think he can do more with it.
For sure.
But do I want to? If I have a 4th-round pick, do I want to go big game hunting for a Puka Nacua type who was a 5th-round pick a couple seasons ago?
Right.
Adam Peters has done a really good job drafting receivers. They clearly evaluate that position particularly well.
And they have plans for those guys. I think that's the thing is, like, there's a great clip of the Rams discussion before drafting Puka that I'm sure you've seen on they put out.
As they should.
Hey, Sean, Les, we got this clip of you guys talking about Nacua. Whatever we said, go ahead. But basically, it's like Sean's like, I know how to use that guy. Like, I have a plan for him. Like, let's do it. I love this guy. And there was some underlying data that suggested if he stayed healthy, he could be really good. And some of, like, the per snap stuff or whatever their analytics said. But, like, ultimately they had a plan for him, and I don't know if their plan was 1,500 yards as a rookie. But they clearly that's the best version of their plan. And so I think that's something to remember as well. Is like, got to have plans for guys, which goes back to our,
initial discussion
featuring a guy that I saw outside earlier today. All right, that's Mitch Tischler. You can listen to him on the Beltway Football Podcast, which is available now wherever you get your podcasts. Of course, the Monumental Sports app as well.
What's up, kiddos? It's your boy Clinton Yates from ESPN. It's the Hoffman Show on the Team 980. Tell your mama I said what's up.